Cool.
So welcome to the I was going to say to the BTS Creative Academy, but no, this is the beginning of a fresh start for me. This is episode 1 of season 8 of the podcast, which I've recently rebranded. So now this is the Martin Talk Show.
Congratulations.
So, well, thank you, AJ. We're somewhere in the 300s of the podcast.
Yeah.
A little bit of background as to why the change, because of the first episode, before we get into you. So the podcast was naturally evolving. It was coming away from just creativity. It was moving into other areas: politics, life, spirituality. Yeah. And my curiosity is evolving as well. I want to explore new fields. But you're a returning guest.
Yeah, I am.
We've spoken previously. We met at the Romford Film Festival last summer.
Yep.
And we had a conversation there, and we went deep into your history in the brief time that we had together to do the podcast. And since then, I wanted to get you back and explore a bit more about you and your filmmaking journey. So that's what we're here to do today.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun last year, and we felt that we needed more time, right, to actually delve into like our favorite films and stuff like that.
Yes, so yeah, because we got into some things. We talked about The Lion King, Terminator 2, and James Bond a little bit as your inspiration. But if anyone's listening and they don't know you, a little bit of your backstory. I know you've made, is it seven short features now?
Well, I would say probably more like 4 like longer shorts and 2 or 3 smaller shorts over the years. But yeah, I would say around. I normally quote 5 because 2 of them are quite short. Okay. So I don't really like count them as.
You don't put them in the list of the.
They were actually a showreel kind of thing for my friend, but we turned them into short films because they have more credibility if they're short films. So that was the last straw and the choice. They were like 3-minute short films, and actually most short films are actually less than 5 to 10 minutes. They tend to be less than 10 minutes in general. And so I got used to making like 20-minute, 30-minute short films. And then some of my friends were like, when The Choice and Lost Straw came out, they were like, it was great, but it was like super short. And I was like, but that's actually the length of normal short films. They tend to be 5 to 10 minutes long.
I've had a look at some of these short films. I've checked them out, and I can see why they're award-winning shorts as well, which is great that you haven't just made these films, you've put them out there into the world, and they really are a good showcase for what you're capable of as a director. You produce, you write them as well, and edit, which is quite common for an independent filmmaker, isn't it? To wear many hats. Yeah.
So I mean, it's one of those where obviously if we could hire an editor, and we did think about hiring an editor and hiring different people, but obviously when you first start out relatively, you're kind of trying to cut costs in a way, because first of all you don't know if you can do a 20-minute short film, right? So it's kind of like, of course we used a composer who was different. Like I didn't write the music. We used sound mix because we know nothing about sound, right? So we definitely chose experts when we needed them. But my friend, my co-producer Chirag, and we edit anyway. So editing is my day job. I edit for a healthcare company. So we're used to Premiere Pro. So we thought, you know what, instead of my friend has had experiences before when he sent something off for color grading or editing, and it's taken ages to come back, or people don't prioritize it. Whereas we wanted to prioritize the release of Joggers before the end of 2022. So we were like, let's have a go at the editing. If it's not great, then we can kind of hand it off. But we learned a lot in that process. So we decided to carry on the editing, which is actually, I mean, it's not really recommended that a director edits his own short films, because the director is normally too attached to the material, and therefore an editor can be more brutal in terms of, okay, we don't need this.
Yeah, it's hard to take that objective view, isn't it, when you've created the piece, but you have to do something that structures it correctly for the audience. Yeah. And if you're the director, the writer, and then you're editing as well, and the editor has a certain job to do, it's hard to do that objectively, isn't it? It's hard to look at the art that you've made and go, this isn't quite right for the story. You see that with some big filmmakers as well, where they get quite self-involved. whilst I like some films like Lord of the Rings, I find that's too overindulgent in parts. And all the extended cuts, whilst some fans may enjoy that, I always find when I'm watching it, just as a pure piece of entertainment, I'm thinking, did that scene really need to be there? And that's often where the director can't let go of their piece. But you know, at this level, I presume you're learning a lot from taking on many different roles. That's driving your career forward. Tell me a little bit about that. How that helps you actually doing multiple roles.
Well, I mean, going back a bit, we when I first started really delving into filmmaking I was around 14, 15. And so that's when me and my other friend Warren really had to do everything by ourselves. We had to act in it as well.
Yes, yeah.
And so we had to act in it with the comedy sketches, like 5 to 10 minutes long. And they weren't like official short films. They were more like friends having fun, really, with a webcam that we had got. So we had to learn how to edit on like Windows Movie Maker, which is like a simple editing platform. We had to learn about pacing. We had to learn about even acting as well. That's where I learned I probably can't be an actor. But lots of different things like lighting. One story I sometimes tell is that we made a short comedy sketch called The Con Man Catcher, right? Which was based on, remember the shows back like 20 years ago when people would have like a hidden camera? Right. Yeah. And they would try to find these people selling illegal DVDs outside supermarkets, right? And we always used to see those and we were like, okay, why don't we make like a funny sketch out of this where I'm like a undercover person and I'm trying to like find this illegal like seller of DVDs. And I remember on that one, obviously when you're undercover, your camera is here, right? So it tends to be shaky and not clear. So we use that to our advantage. We were like, okay, we just got webcam, right? This won't look great, but it's because the storyline shows that it's an undercover kind of person, so it kind of makes sense. And I remember like it came out, lots of people loved it at school, it did really well, but I had one friend who was a close friend was saying, the camera was shaking all over the place, I couldn't really see what was happening, right? So even things like that would teach you, okay, so I know the premise of the story is that it's a hidden camera, but for the next episode we'll just try to keep it a bit more, still at times and be a bit more conscious about how the camera is moving, because it will still look like a hidden camera, but it will kind of make more sense and it might be a bit more clear. So even from episode 1 of that to episode 2, at the age of 15, we were learning camera work, right? And then we were learning stuff like editing and timing as well. So there would be times where I would have to look at the illegal DVD person who was my friend, and then look down at the illegal DVDs. I had to time that as well. So there was no point of like looking down and the guy's talking, right? You wouldn't really like, it wouldn't be a good kind of edit. So really it was from the age of 15 that I was kind of learning different things. And obviously when you watch movies themselves, you can tell when movies drag a bit, or if you thought this performance wasn't great. So I really took it upon myself, not as a goal to become a filmmaker, but just because I was interested in it, I was passionate about it. And so I mean, like you said with Lord of the Rings, I watched those extended editions, and I mean, I liked them just because I just wanted more material to kind of look at. But I remember with the Star Wars films, how George Lucas kept re-releasing them and adding like images, digital images and stuff, and that was a bit overindulgent. And it was just interesting to see when in interviews how he would talk about that, and he would be kind of trying to justify why he was doing it. And so I can kind of see both sides, but it was a great learning process doing all of that.
Yeah, and I wonder about I want to go back to, you touched on the beginning there a bit about fun at the start of all this. Being now 5, 6, 7 movies down the line, are you still having fun? Are you still enjoying the process? And what does that fun look like for you as someone that's moving into professional filmmaking? Yeah,
so I mean, I really like every part of it, really. Even writing the story. For example, I'm writing a feature film at the moment, and it's fun in terms of I can imagine the movie in my head, and so there's different aspects of it. I like producing as well, where you have to organize everything. And so the fun comes in a different way. It's like more strategic this time. So it's more like with a purpose. So it's a different kind of fun. The fun we used to have when we were 15, we would just turn up. It was a PlayStation webcam, so we'd play PlayStation, and then we'd say, okay, let's make like it was like the summer, right? So it was like light for like 14 hours or whatever.
So at that time when you're 14, 15, you're able to put yourself in a position without thinking about it too much of simply play. Yeah, aren't you? When you're making a film at that age, you can just play. There's no consequences to the thing that you're making. Yeah, you're just doing it for the process. But how can we? And is there a way that we can keep that as we move forward and as we want to do this as a profession and as a career?
There definitely is a way to do that, and we definitely have fun on set. Like I think on Infidelity set a couple of years ago, there was a scene we were doing, and we were just in hysterics. We were laughing so much because of the way the scene looked in terms of what was happening in the scene. And it wasn't even a funny scene. It was supposed to be a serious scene, right? But the way the camera was lined up looked a bit like dodgy, right? And so we were just in hysterics. And so really you've got to have that attitude of fun anyway. I never go into film, like I don't really go into film any more stressed. I'm not like, oh, we must get this shot, or the light is going, whatever. Like that, obviously that's on my mind. But I definitely try to like find moments where we can have fun on set. And it happens organically, right? It happens naturally. Like we were actually filming at King's Cross for my next short film, Fountain of Youth, a few months ago. And we were on the square, and we were just laughing so much because people were getting in the way in the shot, and all kinds of things were happening, right? So
that sounds actually, a lot of people say that's stressful. That's all of them things you're describing, people getting in the way of the shot. But it sounds to me like you're repositioning that to work for you.
Yeah, it's really all about mindset. So it's the way you look at things, really. People can get stressed. I've seen people get stressed in that situation.
I've been on film sets as well in my professional career as an actor in the past, where it's been very stressful. And I've seen how that stifles the creativity, and it puts that stress puts kind of like boundaries in place. And I also sometimes have got to the belief somewhere that sometimes these things that start going wrong, like you're filming out in the wild, out in the real world, and people start getting in the way, sometimes they happen for a reason. Okay. Have you ever experienced that at all?
I mean, obviously, the way I normally think about things in terms of mindset is that I go with the flow, really. So even if we were shut down for whatever reason, right, it's not the end of the world. I think because I don't have that pressure of like a studio on top of me saying that, okay, we must finish this by the end of the day. Like if, for example, the King's Cross shoot didn't work out, we would have just gone on another day. And because the relationship with the actors and the crew is good, I would just have to say, look, we have to come back another day because it's not working out. Or we'd find a creative way to kind of, change the location somewhere. I think the fact that, because I'm producing it and we've got flexibility, maybe that's why I don't feel
it gives you freedom in what you're doing.
And so in a way, in terms of career, I'm probably closer to the professional side in terms of progress, right? But I'm still having the fun that I had at 14, 15. It's probably just a bit more organized. So it's probably it's fun, but at the same time, there's at the back of my mind, it's like, okay, we have to get this shot. But it's not the end of the world if it doesn't happen. So for one short film we did, we had like a morning where most of the shots were not completely in focus, right? So it was stressful seeing it on the editing platform that it's out of focus. And me and my co-producer Chirag were like frustrated. But at the same time we were like, okay, cool. We just need this person, this person, this person. We need half a day. I'll contact them and just tell them what's happened, and then see if we can reshoot this. And we reshot it like a couple of weeks later. And it was actually a better reshoot because the weather was better as well. So it actually made it look better. So it was a blessing in disguise in a way. And so
that takes me back to that. Sometimes these things happen on purpose. When things go wrong, if you lean into it, it tends to work out for the better. Do you think the piece would have been so good if you'd have went with the original shot had it have been in focus?
Well, if it wasn't in focus, we definitely just discussed, can we get away with this? But we definitely probably couldn't, right? If we wanted to maintain quality. I'm not sure, but I'm glad it did happen because I know what it's like to do a reshoot now. Like, I know what it's like. But I tend not to dwell on those things as much. Like, did this happen for a reason, etc., etc. Like, I just literally go with the flow. And there used to be a time when I was younger, probably in my 20s, where I did kind of look at the past and think about why this happened or if there was a reason or blah, blah. But really, it just caused more stress. So I don't know what happened. It was probably my early 30s where I was just like, if something's happened in the past or in the present, right, I forget about it right away. So much so that I used to turn up at work on Mondays and my colleagues would be like, oh, how was your weekend? And I would have forgotten what I did on the weekend, right? And they'd think like I was talking rubbish, basically. But it was true. I literally left it in the past.
Okay.
So I think if things happen, I really try to go with the flow nowadays. And I'm probably sure there is sometimes a reason things happen and it's beneficial in a way. But at the same time, I just don't think about it anymore. So
there was a really powerful book that I read about 18 months ago, The Power of Now. Have you heard of that book?
No.
And it talks about, you know, where we live right now. The only thing we have control about is now, this very moment. Everything that's been has gone. Everything that's coming doesn't exist. We literally have this moment. And it's gone within not even a blink, within a second, and we're already past it. So whilst there can be lessons to be learned, but dwelling on it and holding on to it doesn't help us in any way. And that's a really powerful thing for a filmmaker, space for a filmmaker to be, because things do change, don't they, when you're making a film? The original concept and idea that you had at the beginning of writing any of these films, I guess none of them have been exactly that come the end, have they?
Probably a version of it in a way, but yeah, there's definitely things you've got to like. The way you imagine it in your head isn't exactly the way it comes across on screen. And there's obviously times where you've got to trust the cinematographer, you've got to trust this person to do the job right. So they might have a slightly different idea. And the thing about me is that there's some directors or some people, right? I'm thinking about like professional directors who are established in the industry who are like, these are my lines, you must say my lines, or this is the way I want to do my shot. I need to do like 100 takes until I get it right. But I'm a bit more flexible in the terms that, look, I'm just grateful to be here in the first place, right? Like this dream I had when I was a kid, a teenager, right, is becoming realized in a sense. So it's kind of like, look, I'm just happy I have the chance to have a shot. In terms of writing a story, people trusting me to tell it, and then eventually winning awards for it. Like it's actually it was planned in a sense. Like I was planning to pull the trigger around a few years ago, like even before the pandemic. Like I wasn't doing anything, but I was learning my kind of craft, and I was talking to people and just seeing how things were done, watching YouTube videos. And so when I pulled the trigger in 2022, like people, like I didn't really talk about.
When you say pull the trigger, what do you mean by that? Do you mean sort of like a leap into this, committing to being a filmmaker? Is that what you mean?
So I was basically, I was a data analyst at a healthcare company for a few years, right? And then the pandemic happened, which was okay. I was learning my kind of data analysis, right? And I was enjoying it at the time. And then I actually got COVID at one point. And so I had to self-isolate for like 10 days, right? And it was a proper self-isolation, as in I would like, it wasn't COVID, it was like a normal flu for me. But in terms of like self-isolating, I was in my room for most of the day, just trying to like get food, blah, blah. And I was actually ill. Like it wasn't like, I've just lost my like taste or whatever. It was, I was actually ill. It was a bad flu, but I wasn't like, my life wasn't under threat or anything. It was just a bad flu. And I remember thinking about it. I was like, if I don't become a filmmaker now, it's never going to happen. Like I must do it. Like it made me appreciate life a bit more. It just in general, right? Just like being kind of like in a prison cell for like 10 days, right? It was kind of like as soon as I'm free.
The way the world was running before that moment, everyone was just moving forward with their life, and each day would roll into the next. But I'm meeting so many people whose lives had a pause, whether that was for 10 days, 3 months, a whole year. Everyone had to stop that continuous motion. But within that pause, I've met a lot of people that good has come from that.
Yeah.
And so do you believe good has come from that moment?
Yeah, and it wasn't only the 10 days. There's probably a bit of a pause before that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely believe that what it does is it reorientates you. So you kind of think, all right, so sometimes people, I mean, obviously life is busy, right? So you're going to work, you might have a relationship, you might have, rent to pay, et cetera, right? And even like, for example, from Monday to Friday last week, right, I was planning to do some writing, but I could only write on Friday because I was so busy for the whole week, right? And it wasn't like I was being lazy. Like I would wake up, go to I work from home, so I go to work, and then I'd go to the gym, come home from a gym, make lunch. Like by the time everything is done, it's already 5, and you're relatively tired, but I know that I have to keep going, right? So, but then there's a football game on at 8, and I'm like football obsessed, right? So it's kind of like I only have 2 hours to do it, and sometimes those 2 hours they just get away from you. So sometimes, like even sometimes on a bank holiday, I can recharge, right, and have a bit of a plan for the next week. And it's hard to do that if you're constantly going. So a bit of a break is good sometimes. It's not always possible for people because you've got mortgage to pay or rent.
So I wonder how we can, if we're seeing so many people have had benefit from that pause. Any idea how we can refine that now? Now COVID isn't a thing in this moment. How could we find that again?
I mean, I think the best way, because obviously people get tired during the week, is to use your weekends a bit better. So I know people, like even myself, sometimes I don't do it as much as I used to, but we'll meet with friends or go out for a drink on Friday or Saturday, and that's fine. You should enjoy life. That's what it's for, right? But at the same time, like if you go out for a drink on Saturday, you come home at 3 a.m. You have to wake up late the next day. You are probably like hungry, you want some fried food, so your nutrition goes down the drain. And then before you know, it's like 6 p.m. on a Sunday, and you're like, you know what, I'm just gonna like chill for the next 3 hours, go to sleep, and just be ready for Monday, right? That's
because we need to actually rest somewhere within that. But the rest isn't actually the pause, is it? The rest isn't that having a break from continuously moving in life. Having a fulfilled life is wonderful, but if we are seeking some redirection, then it kind of needs to have, you need to find this moment to have nothing in. And like you say, a weekend is a great opportunity to have that. Most people, try and work 5 days a week. So on them 2 days, maybe that is a time that you need to look to have a break.
Yeah, and to be honest, a weekend is long enough for like a mini pause. But then let's say you have like a holiday, right? Let's say you take 5 days off of work. So you have let's say 9 to 10 days off. People tend to will book their flight for the Friday and then literally come back on the Sunday evening, which is fine. You want to enjoy your holiday. Yeah. But what you could do is book a slightly shorter holiday and have 3 days to just recharge.
The amount of times I've come back from a holiday and said, I need a holiday from the holiday. Yeah. Because whilst, life it can be fulfilled and you can be enjoying it, there's something inside of you saying, just stop. Yeah, just stop for a moment. And in them moments as well, when I force myself to pause now, I force myself to pause by watching a movie, by listening to some music, by, I think whilst I love contributing to the world, I also enjoy consuming from the world. And in consuming movies, music, books, that's where I find my moments to stop. So I guess it's helpful for us as creatives to do that, in the sense of I also take some learning from it. If you struggle with pausing, if you struggle with stopping, I say because I do. So I say to myself, right, I'm watching this movie, but I know that I'm not just getting pure entertainment from it. I know that there's something to learn here.
Yeah, and even like some Netflix or any other streaming platform shows where it's just like television that's not like intellectual, it's just whatever, right? I enjoy watching that sometimes because like it just switches you off and you can actually laugh or whatever. So that is really helpful. Music does that too. But I mean, what works for me is actually nothing. Like on a Saturday and Sunday,
just simply nothing.
Wake up, maybe go to the gym and just literally put my life on a piece of paper and like where can I improve, what are my goals, blah blah. I think you have to do that. If you have nothing that you're striving for, if you have no purpose or goal, right, you will just drift through life and just waste time. And so it's, I mean,
so some of the things we're talking about, I completely understand what you're getting, but some of the things that we're kind of discussing are sometimes a bit contradictory, aren't they? That we're saying in one hand you need to pause and you need to be in the present moment, but we also need to look to the future, right, to have some direction. And I think that's why we call it kind of like having a path in life, that we are traveling somewhere. But I do like to think that on that path we can sit down and look at the direction. We don't have to look nowhere into the abyss. We can go, right, do we want to turn left next? Or but if you're walking along a path, you are allowed to stop before you go to the next bit. But you should also be aware, what is the next thing? Yeah, you've got to have some sort of direction, I think. It doesn't have to be detailed, but you've got to be like, okay, by the end of this year, I want to have acted in like a short film. It doesn't have to be major. And again, I found I've broken that down into really kind of like one sentence things now. I used to be very vast and wide and I want to do all of this, but I've tried myself personally to narrow it. So what do you do when you're looking to the future? How do you guide where you want to go? So if you're looking, you're working on something now and then you're having a pause, how do you look to what's next? So I tend, obviously with like in the filmmaking industry, there's different dates, like for example, festivals at certain dates, right? So for example, right now, there's a festival in Berlin called Berlinale in February, right? And for me, so that's there. Then Cannes is in May, right? So I've got these like kind of checkpoints or landmarks to be aiming for. And I kind of have a rough idea of where it's going. So I need to be able to have my script ready, my pitch deck ready for Berlin, right? So really that's all I'm focusing on at the moment, apart from work, gym, etc. It's like very simple goals to reach the next kind of stage and just have the following stage in your mind. So I mean, I can use a football analogy. Like when you ask a manager or a player, like, do you think you can win the league title this season? They almost always say it's all about the next game, the next game, the next game. They know they've got, a big game in 2 or 3 weeks time, right? But it's literally all about the next game. If you don't concentrate on the next game, you will drop points or you will lose. And that game in the future won't matter anymore. So I kind of apply that to my life as well, in the sense that this is my next kind of target. I know Cannes is coming. I know, LA might be coming again, but let me just focus on the next thing. And then you could break that down into the next day, right? So today I'm coming here, right? So that was on my mind on the weekend. As soon as this is done, obviously I look forward to watching it on YouTube. But at the same time, like, it will be gone, right? Like if I make a mistake here or whatever, like I won't dwell on it. I'll just like move on to the next thing. And so I think the best way to do it is like that. I mean, that's the way I found it. Yeah, and you're taking me back to what my mum always said to me. She always said to me, put one step in front of the other. That's all you need to do. Just one step at a time. Simple as that. And, if we want to get, I am going to get into a metaphor now, but if you consider life as like climbing a mountain, you can look at the mountain and you can have a look at what you hope is going to be at the top of that mountain. Yeah. But if you're just continuously looking up there, you're going to stumble. You're going to trip over on your climb. All you can do on that climb is look at what's in front of your feet one moment at a time. Yeah. And I think you won't reach there with whatever your goal is for a year's time, 5 years' time, if all you're doing is looking that far ahead.
Yeah, I think my manager at my day job says something which is very like pertinent. She says, we underestimate what we can do in like 10 years and overestimate what we can do in a year or something like that, something along those lines. So it's true that we tend to like fill our next year with too many things, and then we get disillusioned when they all break down, right? But if we fill that in the next 5 or 10 years, then I think it's more doable, because you can make a lot of progress in 10 years. But yeah, I mean, it's really, all of it is a mindset kind of thing, and these like philosophical ideas I love, because like it really helps me break down. For me, because I'm a a technical guy, like through like education, I'm always like thinking about logical ways to do things. And so though I work in art as well and in technical stuff, I kind of like bind them together. And really like telling me take one step at a time, right, just speaks to me a lot, because it's like I know what to do. It's like logically one step, next step. And I think it's for me, it's the best way to do it. Think of the next game, think of the next one, and then
it's a great philosophy, and it seems quite peaceful as well. It seems quite a nice way to move through this life and whatever career it is you're following. And I think it does particularly help in creative careers like filmmaking, where there is going to be lots of obstacles along the way on your journey. So we've touched a little bit on your day job. So being a filmmaker and someone that's, you've pulled the trigger, this is what you do and who you are now, but you still need to earn an income, which doesn't come from independent filmmaking, unfortunately. So what do you do to support yourself as an independent filmmaker?
Well, I used to be a data analyst at a company called Doctify, and then because my CEO is such a kind person, right, she actually brought me back as an editor for their online videos. So doctors can like film videos about themselves, about their procedures and stuff, and we put them on our YouTube channel. And so it kind of, because media is becoming a big thing in like in healthcare as well. Consultants have to kind of like show who they are and expose their kind of practices and stuff. And so it's becoming a big thing now. So luckily I used to be a data analyst, and that was purely because, well, first of all, I'm good at math. I did a math degree, right? So I actually knew how to do data analysis, right? It was fulfilling me in a sense, but not all the way. Like I definitely needed the filmmaking to kind of come there. So when I started filmmaking, my data analysis improved because I was more fulfilled, and therefore I was happier, and therefore, I was more enthusiastic about data stuff. A few years ago, like my manager would give me like a data project, right? And at the end of the kind of like introduction, he'd be like, "Oh, you should be super excited about this," because I obviously didn't show any enthusiasm. And I was like, "Yeah, I'm excited," and I was somewhat excited, but it doesn't excite me as much as filmmaking. So I was lucky that obviously it was always a planned decision as well. Like I always planned to do a maths degree, even though I loved film back then as well. I was like, if I do a film degree, first of all, I know people like Tarantino, Nolan, my Spielberg, my kind of like director heroes didn't go to film school, and you can make a film without going to film school. It does help because I definitely am lacking some knowledge from film school, which I'm trying to learn now. So it does definitely help, but I knew you didn't need a degree in filmmaking to be a filmmaker. So I did a degree in maths because I was decent in maths. So really it was around 25 when I was like, hold on a minute, I can actually earn money from my like data job, right? And use that money to make short films. Right. And for some reason, like I think about 7 years ago, I was like, I must do one or the other. Like it has to be data analysis or it has to be filmmaking. Right. And then an old girlfriend of mine was like, why don't you just do both? Like, why don't you just work your ass off and basically 9 to 5 and then 5 to 9, just do both? And I was like, hold on a minute. That makes complete sense. Right. So I think if I didn't have a day job, I would probably be struggling more as a filmmaker as well, because then I'll be thinking, okay, well, I need to earn money as well. How can I do this when I to earn money? And the thing is, what I tend to see is that people, look, my goal is to make feature films, right? And I think that sometimes when that's your only source of income, you'll kind of like maybe do the odd job here and there, where it's not your passion, like maybe like a wedding event or some kind of other event. And it's not your passion, but because it brings in money for you, your kind of dream about being a feature film director kind of like goes to the side a bit. And it makes, obviously you got to pay the rent and stuff, but at the same time, like I feel like I've already wasted too much time to kind of like do that. So I'm like going full for the feature film kind of route, but also I've got a very flexible day job, thanks to my CEO, that I can actually do both, and it's quite flexible. If I had to go in 5 days a week and do data analysis and report to managers and stuff like that, it would be because that's a technical job as well. Your brain is in a different space. It's very hard to go from here and then start writing, for example. So I've basically, with some help, have found like a system where I can earn money, and I don't have to worry about money in terms of a day job, and have something which is slightly related to what I'm going to do anyway. So I edit every day, which means I'm getting better.
You're still being creative. Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. How does your day job feed into your creative outlet? How does your day job, you know, the source of income you know, what you need to be doing right now? How is that supporting you as a filmmaker?
Well, it makes me a better editor, which makes me a better filmmaker, because filmmaking is all about editing, really. I think just having that skill will help. And let's say in the future, I've always got that skill. So let's say Netflix comes calling one day, or another streaming platform saying we need an editor, right? That will get me... I've got the experience, right, from actually editing at a corporate company, a business, right? I can say, look, I've got this kind of experience, and that will get me closer to, you know, another kind of part of the industry. Because when you work at some of these streaming services, you get exposed to different things. And so I've always said, like, I heard from like Will Smith once on an Instagram post, like he said, no time is ever wasted. I think he learned it from some kind of Buddhist monk or something, but he said no time is ever wasted. Whatever you're doing will kind of feed into something else. And my analogy that I use is that this has never really happened to me, but for some reason I use this as an analogy, is let's say you're chilling out with your mates, right? It's bonfire night and you're setting off some fireworks, and your mate's like, oh, can you video this, right? You get your iPhone out or whatever phone you have, and you video it, right? And then you watch the video and you're like, oh wait, we couldn't really see anything because I was too close to the firework, right? Therefore I didn't see when it like kind of launched, and I couldn't like see the entire kind of explosion of the firework. So maybe next time I should just go back by about 20 yards and please, or set it off again, please. And they set it off, and it's like, it's a much better kind of video. So you're just having fun with your mates, right? But you've learnt, like by accident, that, you know, the shot will be better if you go 20 yards back. And then just pretend like 20 years later you're making a feature film, and something's happening, and you're like, oh wait, let's just move it back a bit because then we can catch this thing. And
you've already been there. You've been there by accident. You've learned by accident. What a wonderful thing to experience. So I know a filmmaker that's been in the film industry since leaving school, and that's all he's done. And he's in his 50s now, and so that, you know, that's a long time. That's 35 plus years that he's been in one industry, and that industry is tough at the moment. And so he's having to work in Lidl's at the moment. Complete career change, and he's having to work in Lidl's just to be able to make sure he can pay the bills. And this is what happens to us in the creative industries and when you're freelance and self-employed. And at first, it was like the end of the world for him. You know, having to, after 35 years of doing the following the dream, now working in Lidl's behind the counter. For a little while, it was hell for him. But then he started to realise he was getting a glimpse into another world, into a world that he'd never experienced before. And he said to me recently, he didn't realise there were so many different types of people out there to experience, and that people communicate in different ways. And he's starting to realise how just seeing these people, even for just while they're at the till with him for 3 or 5 minutes, that those characters may feed into his films when he's back in the industry. So maybe this is important to experience other things and learn by accident to feed into our art, to feed into our craft.
I think, and then the best way to do that is to be out there, like to experience different things. There's no point of like staying at home and just watching TV and then seeing different people and being like, you've actually got to experience them, talk to them. You've got to like go abroad and actually see, you know, like the pyramids are the pyramids, right? But actually seeing a pyramid in front of you, it's just like, wow, right? And it's one of those things is that you just need to expose yourself as much as you can to the public, as much as you can to real life, right? And you'll find a lot of the assumptions and like prejudice you've had before just goes away, because you're like, okay, this person is actually normal. There's actually nothing wrong with them. And then, okay, this place is actually amazing. This waterfall, I get the hype, right? It also depends on your mindset. Like if you've got a negative mindset, you'll never see like beauty in front of your eyes, really. So you've got to go with a slightly positive mindset, having the openness to kind of like want to explore and want to do something. Otherwise, you're just missing out on life. And
going out there in the world. So you mentioned Egypt. So when did you go to Egypt then?
I went a few years ago, and it was actually one of the places I liked the most. But I also have been to loads of places in the world, and one that actually is quite interesting is I went to Toronto, right? And Toronto's like a normal city and everything, and it's not got like, obviously it's got Niagara Falls, and which is great. But I just remember being at Niagara Falls and just being like, okay, I get the hype now. It's just amazing the way.
There's one thing seeing it on TV, but a different thing seeing it in real life.
And the one thing that I can remember is just the way the water falls over the edge, right? It almost seems as if it's floating, and you don't really get that, or you can't really appreciate that when you see it on TV, right? Obviously, there's different layers of water, and the top layer looks like it's like floating off. It's just magical, really. And there's really different ways that can kind of present in life, and it can happen on at King's Cross Station as well. You can see something, you're like, oh my god, it's amazing. I remember once seeing, it's a random example, but I once saw at college, right? I was at the park and I saw one bird, or I think it was one bird like flying really low, like a big bird, and two birds like kind of attacking it. And I was just like, just seeing that like happen in front of me, I was just like, this like David Attenborough on like just like in 3D,
just seeing nature to run its course. And I think that's a good example of that we get consumed with the world in which we're part of, and then to get a glimpse of those other worlds, I think helps us find the path again for ourselves. It helps us rediscover maybe where we're going, or maybe highlights elements that we didn't see before. I think there's a danger in kind of echo chambers where the world in which we live is just constantly the same. I see that a lot in the theatre world. I see people doing theatre shows sometimes. The audiences come that love theatre or are involved in theatre is a large portion of the audience, giving good positive feedback all the time, and the quality seems to drop a little bit because of that. Whereas if they go and experience other medias a bit more, then they perhaps get a better feel for what the audience might be interested in, and it might contribute to what they're doing a little bit stronger.
I think that's true the other way for me as well, because I used to go to cinema a lot, right, but didn't go to the theatre as much, right? And I remember when I first went to the theatre, I was like, this is so cool, this is just so different, like the way they act as well, the way the story is.
It's very common that we're not crossing the boundary. Theatre and film are so heavily connected, and actors. Just if you take actors for example, they work in both industries, but then the makers of those things tend to stay in their space. So how has that helped you going to the theatre for your filmmaking then?
Well, obviously when you're in the theatre, I think the actors tend to have to be a bit more louder and a bit more not overact, but they've got to like kind of
project.
Yeah, they've got to project basically, right? So it's much different, and I've actually worked with
there's no close up on the stage.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, even the changes of the stage kind of like stuff, right, is amazing. But I think I've worked with an actor who's more of a theatre actor than a film actor, and I could see the difference in their acting, right? And so that kind of informs, because you've got to be like, okay, how will this look on camera, and how will people see it? Because if someone overacts on a film or in a camera, right, you kind of see it right away, and it's normally not their fault. It's normally because they've interpreted the character in a way where it's that's how it's come across. But sometimes as a director, because that's my job to direct, right, we have to like tell them to like come back a bit in terms of a level, or go up a bit depending on their acting. So that really informed me when I saw in theatre. I was like, all right, this makes sense. This is why sometimes some actors seem to overact. It's not that they're overacting, it's just maybe because they're theatrically trained.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
and
what
within that space of theatre, you need to be larger than life, because someone could be watching you that are 100 yards away, and so you need to express that emotion bigger than what you do when the camera's 4 inches away from your face. Because if the camera's 4 inches away from your face, so is the audience 4 inches away from your face. And as an actor, I've fallen foul to that. Often a criticism that I would get as an actor is people would say, "I can see you acting, Martin." And that's the worst thing you want to be doing.
Who said that to you?
It was a friend of mine. And I think for me personally, I'm quite good at taking criticism. I do kind of try to construct the criticism and try and look for where it's come from, even when it's negative. But yeah, as an audience member, as a person being entertained, we don't want to watch actors. We want to be absorbed in the moment. We want to believe it's real. And if we're watching acting, then as an actor, we've failed. That's what I personally believe. And so that's hard when the camera's this close, isn't it? To stop acting and to be real. And I guess as well, it is a skill that takes time to learn. It's not natural for everyone to stop thinking so much.
And the camera, when it comes to filmmaking, is like, it picks up the smallest things on your face. So if you like do a little smile or whatever, right, or like a little a blink or whatever, or you're sad and your nose does it sniffs or whatever, right? You can do that very slightly on camera, it will catch it. But if you do that in theatre, then people won't see that you're sad. You have to make a big deal out of it, right? And so it's obviously there's similar art forms but slightly different. And so it's I suppose it's a director's job, right? That's what a director does, is to help with performances. And sometimes, okay, you can get it wrong, or maybe someone will look like they're overacting or underacting. That's how you learn as a director as well. So I'm just trying to think of an example, but I don't know as an actor, what's worse? Is it told that you're overacting or underacting?
Neither really. I guess as an actor, you should be listening to that assessment of what you're doing and adjusting, whether that's bring it up a little bit or tone it down. I guess that's one of the first requirements that an actor should do. Not many can adjust, actually. Being a director as well, I've also auditioned a lot of people that I'll give a very simple note, like, can you just raise your energy a bit? And it's exactly the same.
Yeah,
it is hard to do. It is hard to go, right, okay, so my energy dropped. What do I need to do to bring it up? Is it voice? Is it movement? So I guess none of these observations, especially from a director, an actor shouldn't be taking it personally. They should just be looking to adjust their craft.
Yeah. They're trying to help you out at the end of the day, right? So.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing as well, is to understand that when you're working on a piece of theatre or you're in a film, everyone wants the best from that project. So if someone's got something to say about how you need to change what you're doing, then surely you want to find that as well.
Yeah, you want to find out before the show, right? In the preparation. So, that's why rehearsals happen, right? Because you're trying different things out and you can kind of find a balance to what you want to do.
Rehearsals, that's an interesting place to go to, because that doesn't happen so much with filmmaking, particularly independent filmmaking. So as a director, do you like to rehearse? What is your process with the actor? What does that look like?
So I tend to plan quite a bit, just because it's cheaper to plan beforehand rather than have to plan on a film set. So with like Infidelity, my last short film, for example, I had a chemistry test with the male and the female actor, and I also in terms of kind of the auditions as well, I was looking at the different types of performances and how to actually manage that. Just remind me of the question. Sorry, just kind of slipped
your
off.
Process of directing. What does that look like?
So in terms of rehearsal, so we rehearsed beforehand. So we did an entire script, like a script table read. It happened online for Infidelity just because we were so far apart, and it was just after kind of COVID. But yeah, it's we do a full rehearsal, and then we'll what I'll do was when I choose the actor, we'll do a script reading of like a scene or two, and I'll play the other part. And when we have everyone together, we'll rehearse online on Zoom or whatever. And if they have questions, they can have questions. Normally, before they actually have the table read, each actor is prepared in terms of how they want the script to go, or how I want to direct them. So I direct them kind of beforehand. And so when the table read happens, everyone's kind of ready. Then it's more about how this person plays off this person, or, you know, this person plays off the other person. And so that all happens online. Obviously, I would love to do that on a real life rehearsal. It's not needed to happen just because once we get on set, like we can block the actor and we can kind of like do any changes there. Sometimes they want to do something different. That's completely fine. I allow them to do that. But yeah, normally the rehearsals and the planning is all done online beforehand, and it's just go on your laptop, and it's relatively easy than having to travel a few miles.
So even with that all that preparation done, it's still important. That thing we was talking about at the beginning of this conversation is to find that flow. Yeah. Though, because when you get on the set and everything's a bit different from what you planned, you do have to still be flexible, don't you? You can't always go to exactly what's planned. And I think that was something for me as an actor that I needed to be more considerate of, and it's taken me a while to learn, is to be on sets and on stage and be able to play. Does play fit into anywhere with what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm quite flexible on set in general, right? So once we have 2 or 3 good takes, I don't know many takes actually. I tend to do less than 5. Before the focus issue, I only did like 3. And then after the focus issue, we were like, okay, let's get 1 more for safety. If it's a longer scene, you tend to do more takes. So I think for 1 4-minute scene, once we did like 10 takes. And so it depends.
See, there's some directors that want to do it in 1.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, unless it was a complete muck up, that's it, done.
Yeah.
Got the moment, thank you very much, in the bag and gone.
So normally, for example, if we do 3 takes, right, we've definitely got it, then people can play on set, as in they can do it in a different way, do it louder, do it, you know, be cry a bit more or whatever, depending on what the scene is about. And so it's definitely allowed on set. And there's been so many times where I've like turned up on a location we thought we were filming at, and we've had to move slightly. And so sometimes I've had to come up with the entire blocking in my head very quickly with the cinematographer and be like, okay, we're going to do it this way. He's going to run this way instead. He's going to stop here. And then we're going to do the scene here. Right. I think, for example, if I was on a bigger production and we had more control over sets and stuff, then would I allow more play or less? I think I probably would allow more. Obviously, we have a time limit, but at the same time, I know that, you know, we're in no rush to get the shot.
So I would like to think that even if you was on a big set, that if you are someone that's for play and can see the benefit of that, then scheduling in that time would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So it's play, but it's structured play.
Yeah.
It's okay. So here's what I want to do on the day. But I want and that's going to take an hour, but I want an extra 15 minutes for discovery to see what the actor brings to the table, or even the lighting director, what they bring to it that day, rather than just, here's my hour. No, actually, I need an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's strange because normally time flows so fast on a film set. Yeah. So I'd probably need an hour plus another hour just in case, and then 15 minutes to wait. So yeah, it's tough because like, obviously you want to respect everyone's time, so you don't want to like keep them there for too long. But yeah, I suppose if you put that time in yourself, then it's probably good. I normally do like 1 maybe take for play or something different, just because I know that look, if I spend another half an hour here, that's going to delay that by another half an hour, and therefore everyone's going to go home at like 10 p.m. And then they won't be enthusiastic the next day. So I'm always worried about just making sure people are, you know, leave on time, because, you know, you have to respect people's time, really.
Tell me a little bit as a filmmaker about your inspirations. We've talked in the past about Steven Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino. Who is it out there that's really driven you to be a filmmaker? Who is it that you look at and go, that's someone I want to be like?
You mean a director?
Director or writer or producer?
Yeah, I would probably say it's tough. So obviously, like I said before, I like the James Bond films, right? So there wasn't really a director there, but I just liked the way the films were made in terms of spy thrillers. And then I think I came across.
Maybe does that from James Bond? Is that about the writing then? That it's the storytelling that you're finding inspiration in?
Yeah, to be honest, it was just the entire kind of like spectacle of the film. I basically started with GoldenEye, which was like one of my favorite films.
That's one of my favorites as well. It gets a bad rap.
Yeah, I mean,
do you know what, the amount of people I say GoldenEye is my favorite, and they go no, that's one of the worst.
No,
it's actually that. I think it came around at the right kind of time for me.
Yeah,
it came out.
Yeah. And the thing is, GoldenEye, I think, is a great film, right? And even Tomorrow Never Dies has become more relevant over the years with the media. Yeah. So I think those are the first two I saw. And then what happened was, I think ITV were doing like a Bond season.
Yes.
And this was the first Bond season.
They did that a few times.
But I think this was the first one that I remember in 98 or something. And then I remember once my granddad basically brought home like the Times newspaper used to get every Saturday, and it was a pullout of like a James Bond kind of ITV what's to come for the next 20 weeks.
Yes,
I remember being obsessed with that and reading.
Do you know what? I'm looking at you. You seem so young. I thought, are we? So I've just turned 40. How old are you?
I'm 35.
You're 35. So you would have been 5 years younger than me, and I remember that era of ITV doing this. They would do a James Bond season where every Sunday they would put on a James Bond film. Yeah. And you knew that Sunday. And so we're talking about the same thing.
I think so, yeah. I think they did quite a few of those seasons.
And that really informed my storytelling and filmmaking and wanting to... Do you know what? I didn't even realise it at the time that I wanted to go into storytelling.
Yeah.
But that was great.
Yeah.
It was a James Bond era, wasn't there? In the late 90s, I think this was.
Yeah, it was. I think it was 98, 99. I remember it was before The World Is Not Enough came out, because we were looking forward to that film. And so I obviously watched those first two, and obviously the N64 game was amazing as well. Yeah. But and then from that season,
that's often, it's funny, GoldenEye the game, N64, is often credited as one of the best computer games ever. But GoldenEye the film is often seen as one of the worst.
To be honest, I wouldn't say one of the worst. I don't think I've seen that as much. I think a lot of people do like GoldenEye, but I think obviously when Daniel Craig came along, the Pierce Brosnan films maybe were seen a bit too
cheesy.
Yeah. But I think maybe only Die Another Day was a bit too cheesy. But the other, if you watch, I've watched the other three recently, and they all still hold up.
Yeah, Die Another Day, it kind of pushed the boundary of the cheesiness to another level, didn't it? The invisible car and the ice palace, and it just kind of went, are we a sci-fi? Yeah. It didn't really know what it was anymore, did it?
I remember as a 12-year-old in the cinema, I was watching that with my dad, right? And I still remember thinking, okay, as a 12-year-old, even I'm thinking this is a bit dodgy right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's why they rebooted it with a realistic thing. But I think even so, going back to the ITV season, right? So I started watching the Sean Connery films, who became my favorite James Bond, because with Dr. No, Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, right? Those films were a bit more grounded in reality. They were more spy, and there wasn't amazing like explosions and actions. And when I tell my friends to watch those original films, which
it was about him as a character, wasn't it, and about the journey that he was on. Whilst there was an element of the gadgets and the explosions,
which came
came a little bit more with each film that went on. But it seemed to, in that era, it was a slow trickle. That it was like, oh right, people like this kind of cheekiness and this gag here and this type of explosion, or what gadget is he going to have in this movie that's different from the last. Whereas towards the end of that kind of Pierce Brosnan era, it was like, can we add a gadget in every 5 minutes? Can we add a joke in every other sentence? And it was like they'd gone to the extreme, so they needed to, in the Daniel Craig era, they had to rewind it all the way back to the beginning, didn't they?
Yeah, and then make it more grounded. I think with the Bourne films as well, like that was really like gritty and grounded, and they had I remember everything really clearly. Like I remember Casino Royale came out, and then the Bourne Ultimatum came out, and then they were like, okay, when Quantum of Solace came out, they made it more Bourne-like with a lot of like shaky cam and quick cuts and stuff.
I'm even going back to the opening credits of Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. It was black and white, a grainy black and white handheld camera was the opening shot. They'd come away from that adventure opening. There was James Bond's previous where James Bond would be skiing and shooting two machine guns and submarine diving and do you know what, just all like really random stuff. Whereas actually the opening shot of Casino Royale was in a toilet, wasn't it? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
he was having a fight in a toilet,
with the guy
in the toilet, black and white, and then it was like, bang, we're in the real world now.
Yeah. even the kind of brutalness of that fight, the way that we're going through all the cubicles. Yeah. So yeah, it's So I mean, I suppose like in terms of inspiration, James Bond was the one that started it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I used to watch like Disney films when I was a kid and stuff, Star Wars. But I think James Bond is the one that kind of, because there were 20 films and they were showing week after week, like you remember, right? It kind of was like, oh my God, this is like amazing, this kind of thriller genre, which tends to be the kind of films I make as well. And then eventually, like, I came across, stuff like Kill Bill, and then Batman Begins, and etc. And then really I enjoyed the storytelling, the way that films were done. So Tarantino's films are always a bit different.
Yes.
And then Christopher Nolan uses a lot of flashbacks in his film, and the structure of his films are so good. And so I think, apart from Steven Spielberg, who was obviously always there with Jaws and all Indiana Jones and stuff, and then Star Wars, those were the kind of inspirations for me, which tend to be the inspirations for most people. I mean, they're good films, right? If you're a good film,
they're blockbusters for a reason, aren't they? That these people you're mentioning, you're talking about Steven Spielberg. Yeah, he changed the world of cinema, didn't he? He laid the foundations for what a blockbuster looks like. A film that can be enjoyed by many, whether it can be enjoyed, if you think of something like Jaws, it can be enjoyed by someone that's young and someone that's old, and there can be lots of different things that you get from it. E.T., another film that is actually for everyone, so Steven Spielberg definitely defined that blockbuster, without Spielberg there wouldn't be a Christopher Nolan, would there?
That's true.
He definitely informed him.
Yeah, I mean, I was like looking at different directors, and it seemed like, for example, Stanley Kubrick inspired Steven Spielberg, and then Scorsese was inspired from directors back from the 40s and 50s. I think everyone kind of stands on the shoulder of giants before
we have to, I think.
And I saw something or read something maybe a decade ago when it was like, I didn't agree with it at the time, but I kind of understand what it meant. And they were like, great artist steal. And so basically Nolan will kind of like take from 2001, Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. The thing is, not many people have an encyclopedic like film knowledge, right? But if you look at some films from like Scorsese from the very beginning, like Taxi Driver, or Tarantino, you'll see scenes very similar in like films from the 50s and Japanese cinema, film from the 20s or the 30s, because we are not exposed to that as much. So we can't make that link. But I'm not saying that artists should steal in terms of...
I'd like to rephrase that as inspired.
Yeah, no, it is inspiration, but there is actual saying that says great artists steal.
Great artists steal. Yeah.
Which is
borrow and we take and I wonder if any of this stuff belongs to us anyway. These ideas that we get.
It's a human experience.
Yeah,
right? So.
We're all in this world, and if an idea comes to us, years ago, a lot of my time was spent in the theatre world, and I'd often come across someone that would go, "Oh, that was my idea, that was mine," but someone else is doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I came to assess that, and I was like, is it your idea really?
Yeah.
You may have expressed it to someone, but they've moved forward with it. Did you move forward with it? I think it belongs to the person that does something.
But it just belongs to like the entire human race, really. It's an experience that we have, right? So I've definitely thought of things other people have thought of. I've not thought that they've stolen it or whatever. It's just we experience, like I think the majority of humans are very similar. Like the fact that memes are so popular, right? It's because we've all had the same experiences, right? And so we see a meme, we send it to our friend, right? Or we see a random meme online, and it's like got 1,000 likes. It's because everyone's been through the same thing. I remember when I was younger, I was like, oh, I'm going through this experience, whatever the experience was. I wonder if other people do it, have gone through it or whatever. And it turns out like thousands of people would have gone through it. Like the most random things that you don't even think of, right?
Yeah.
And people have gone through it. I can't think of an example right now.
Well, I can think of an example with this podcast. Okay. Before I was doing this, I'm quite open with this podcast and talk about this. I felt like a failure in life. I felt like everything was going wrong. But having sat down and spoken to so many different people now, I realized the experiences that I considered failures, a lot of people have shared those same things.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have overcome the things that I was struggling with, and that's given me strength to overcome by looking at others and going, oh, you did that. I did that. You dealt with it this way. I can now take something from that and find a new way to deal with these issues or problems that I've had.
No, it's so true, because I think really it's a mindset thing as well. So you can be in the dumps and be like, oh, life is unfair. Why does this happen to me? Life is hard. Or you can be like, okay, cool. I know this has happened to someone else before. Let me like seek someone out, get some advice or whatever, and see if I can improve my life in that sense. And it's definitely like, it's you have to be brave to do that. You could, like not doing that. I mean, it's your own life, I suppose. But
oh, it is scary to do that. It is. You
have to be brave for sure.
Yeah, it is scary to change things.
Yeah.
You know, if you're struggling with something like I was, like we're going to go to that place of failure now. I struggled a lot with that. I felt like that was it. You know, I'm nearing my 40s and too much has gone wrong and didn't work out. And so, who am I? Where do I move forward with this? And I could have chose to not do anything from there. And I think some people do.
Yeah.
I think my choice was to start to looking at others and started going, how did they come away from this? How did they move forward from this? And I found a lot of that from friends and strength that they'd found. People that were at different parts of their journey to me as well, young friends as well as old friends. And that was a big help in moving forward from that feeling of failure, because actually it wasn't true. Actually, it was just a feeling.
Yeah, it's something called a limiting belief that people have about themselves, and it's kind of like, I don't want to do this because this might happen, or this will happen, or this person will think of this of me, right? But really, it's all in your head. Like, it's not something that people are telling you. Like, I've definitely had, like, before I pulled the trigger on the filmmaking stuff, right? There were probably 3 or 4 years when I was like talking to my friends online or whatever, on WhatsApp and stuff, and saying that, look, I really want to do this film thing, right? But I don't have the belief that this, that, just making excuses in a way. All right, some of the excuses might have been like relevant, but at the same time, you know, I had some really good friends to advise me. And for example, I had one friend who was like 19 or 20 when I was like 26, 27, and we used to work together, and he became a really good friend. And he had this innocence about him, right? Where his advice would be different from like someone who was like 38 who had been through a bit more. But what I did was I kind of like bit the bullet and try to be humble. And because before I was like, I'm not going to take anyone's advice. I should know how to like work it out. But really, but when you become vulnerable and you kind of like take that advice, and then all of a sudden I was taking everyone's advice. So there was a point just before the pandemic where like I had like 4 or 5 friends I really trusted, right? Like long time friends, all from like different age groups or whatever. And I would literally copy and paste the same question on WhatsApp to all of them and get all their responses, right? Okay. And they would all be different responses. And I probably needed to do that at the time because what I was doing, which I didn't realize, was I was trying to help myself from a low moment, but trying to like fast track it. So instead of like talking to one friend and getting the advice and then 2 weeks later talking to one friend, I was copying and pasting all messages to like 5 different people and getting 5 different opinions, right? And that helped fast track me out of it, because
that sounds like a really good idea, a real good way to be analytical about the advice.
Yeah, because I'm analytical, right?
Yeah. So that sounds really quite useful. Yeah, really, because if you go to just one person, it's just one take on the thing. And I think everything that we go through, whether it's just normal things in life or even our creative things that we're pursuing, that if we look at it from one angle, we don't get the full picture, do we? We just get a glimpse.
Yeah, and you get one opinion, and that opinion may be from someone who you have to think about the person you're asking advice from as well, because that person may have gone through something in their life where they're like a bit more careful about or risk adverse, and you get like a younger person who's like just enjoying their life and they like advise you in a certain way. Yeah, so that's so true that I've noticed that people give advice from where they are. Yeah. And I often
take that when people say to me, no, you can't do something.
Yeah.
So I think big thing that I've heard over my life from people giving me advice when it comes to creative things and ideas that I've got is people have said to me, you can't do that. And I actually took that as I can't do that. But I realise now that they're actually saying is,
they can't do that.
I can't do that. They're
exactly.
saying, they can't do it.
Yeah.
So from their position,
right,
they can't pursue that that idea of putting on that play or acting in that film.
Yeah.
So they say you can't as well because I didn't manage it. So how would you be able to do it?
Yeah.
They can't shift their perspective. So I think actually you've come up with a really great idea there of seeking multiple people's different advice, looking at all the different perspectives, and then going, what one do I like? What one fits to me the best?
Which one works for me right now? So I used to also be the kind of person who'd be like, there's like not one truth, but there's one. This is true, right? And I want to find that truth. And if someone gave me a piece of advice which I didn't really align with it, I would be like, oh, okay, they blah blah, right? But I watched a YouTube video about someone saying to themselves that, look, even if this piece of advice is not totally accurate, right, but it works for you to get you to the next step, use it, because the worst thing is staying in the same place again and again and again. Use someone's advice which may not be amazing, but it's a good piece of advice, but it's not exactly relevant to you. But you can use this part of the advice, right, to actually move a step forward, right? And that will actually help you get to the next stage. And then you can look back on that advice and be like, okay, cool, it got me to the next stage, but it might not have been the best type of advice to have, right? So you've got to be very self-aware to kind of send out 5 pieces of information and get 5 pieces of information and know what applies to you. Because including myself, like 10 years ago, I would be in denial about a few things, right? And I would say, okay, I know this is right, but I'm not going to do it because that will expose my character in one way. But once you become like at peace with yourself and self-aware and open up to people you trust, and I repeat, it's got to be people you trust. It can't be like a random colleague that doesn't really care about you or whatever. It has to be people you've had like philosophical debates with.
Kind of, they know you in some
way.
They
know you,
They know your perspective.
Yeah. And really that's the best way I found. And to be honest, it's really helped me from the age of like 28, 29 to get to wherever I am right now, right? But at least I know I'm a bit more I'm fulfilled with my life, right? Like I come across super confident now, but it wasn't the case maybe 8 years ago. People are always telling me, look, you're confident, you're this and that. How did you do it? Like it's a journey, and it's one of those where you've got to allow yourself to be open and vulnerable and just put your ego to the side. Your ego can come back later on, like it probably has for me as well.
Yeah, and I think the ego isn't always a bad thing.
Yeah,
I think the ego does actually protect us sometimes. It does help, but I think being aware of it is a super important thing.
Yeah, and so I would probably say like a bit of ego has come back now. I would definitely see myself thinking a few things, which a few years ago, like I would have been like, oh, whatever. But now I'm like, there's a bit more pride coming back to me than there was like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, right? So at the same time, you've got to be very careful, right? Not to get up your own head as well, because now, for example, like my films are winning awards. I'm like doing interviews and stuff, right? It's very hard not to like think too much of yourself. So I've got to humble myself sometimes. And luckily I've got a great family who humble me as well. Like when my next film comes out, like they'll watch it and they'll give me some criticism, or if I win an award, they won't like hug me and like jump on me and say, oh my god, amazing. Like they'll keep me grounded. I think that's a really good thing to have. Family and friends who help you do that. But yeah, there's definitely like, you have to be super self-aware. Otherwise you see what happens in Hollywood, right? People go off the rails, they're going to drugs, suicide, etc. And I think it's because they've not been fully self-aware, and have just been taken up by this entire kind of industry. And because you get offered all kinds of things in terms of like opportunities, all kinds of things, really.
And I guess as we're pursuing things in life, as things seem to start to work out for us, then of course the ego is going to grow. as things start to fall into place and we may have got a few bits right, then we are going to go to this place of, oh, maybe we know everything. Maybe we do. But, having that balanced approach will, I guess, keep us on track. And having those right people around you to keep you on track is very important. I also wonder if deep down we do really know what the right thing for us is, but our ego or sometimes our over-analytical brain will stop us from just going with what the right thing is. And so having those right people that know you, like you say, they can take you to that right place. And how do you find what the right, because I want to go back to that 5 text message thing. How do you find what one is the right piece of advice? Is it a feeling?
Do you know what?
Is it I trust that person the most because they know me the best? What is it to go, right, that person's going to take me down the right route?
I mean, it's obviously multi-layered, right? There's obviously, like you said, sometimes you know what the right answer is. You just need someone else to tell you that you're not like crazy, right? And if 2 or 3 people tell you the same thing, then you kind of know that's correct. That's great. Also, sometimes you can get a piece of advice and it's not exactly what you need, but if you can use something from it, it's something that you can kind of like use in the future. And it's not about correct advice, I would say. It's because, I mean, those 5 text messages went out like one day, and then probably the same question went out like 3 months later in a different way. So it's just one of those where you've got to kind of take what you can from each message and disregard it if it's not useful, and take it if it is useful. No one's going to give you the perfect piece of advice. You've got to work out that for yourself. They can give you another view. But I think, obviously, like you've said, sometimes deep down you know what you have to do, but it's just limiting beliefs that mean that you don't want to do it. And sometimes people are just lazy. People are just like, okay, I know I need to go to the gym, but do you know what? I'm already tired at the end of the day. It's going to take 2 more hours, this and that. So it's like everyone knows they need to exercise, right? But actually saying it and doing it is two different things. Yeah. So it's just, you've just got, that YouTube video I watched when that guy said, look, you've just got to take what's useful to push you forward. In a way, is it lying to yourself? Is it being a bit delulu? I wouldn't say so. I would say that if it's useful and it gets you to that point, and just get to that point first, and then look back and be like, okay, maybe I was a bit delulu to get to this stage, right? But I'm at this stage now, and let me move forward from the stage.
Is being delusional a problem? Or we're being knocked on the door. Can you hear that?
Not sure.
Maybe somewhere else. Being delusional, is that such a bad thing? Because I often wonder, am I delusional with what I'm doing?
I think we all do.
But then actually, is that delusion helping me?
Yeah.
Is that because a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you're 300 episodes in and doing this podcast. How do you do it?" And actually, that's the real answer. Is because I'm delusional. Is because maybe I think there's something to this. But I'm enjoying it. But and I see where I'm going. I'm looking at the top of that mountain 5 years from now, and would I keep going without that delusion of where I want to be in 5 years? I don't know if I would.
I think so. Right now we're 2 delusional people hearing knocks on doors.
Yeah, we did. Oh, you heard that too, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm going to play this back this moment, and I guarantee there was a knock somewhere.
Okay,
might have been, but
No, I think so. So I've met people who seem a bit delusional as well, right? But there's so many different levels. You've got to be self-aware of that delusion. So it's like sometimes, like you said, you felt delusional, and I've felt delusional sometimes, right? But it's not delusional as in, I think like, I'm Superman or something, and I'm kind of like, I must save that person right there, just jump out the window. And it's not that kind of delusion. It's more about those limiting self-beliefs that people have, right? Just putting them to one side. And I think being slightly delusional, right, helps with that because it stops that voice.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. Because there are plenty of days where I can say to myself as well, I'm no good at this.
Yeah.
I'm not capable of this. So actually, is there a problem in saying to myself, I am good at this.
Yeah.
I can do this.
It's funny. I mean, psychologists say that if you just smile more, right, you feel happier.
Yes.
So sometimes, I mean, people lie to themselves every day. Let's be honest, right? People are being delusional about all kinds of things every day. So if it can serve you in a way, then do it. But obviously, like, there are definitely times when I look every like 3 months or so, I'm like, do you know, what am I actually doing the right thing? Like, am I? But the thing is, when you start getting awards and stuff like that, it kind of shows. Yeah, it kind of shows that you're not. And to be honest, if you look at many people, probably someone like Lady Gaga probably felt that she was delusional, but now we believe her because she's everywhere and she's an actress. She's won an Oscar for a song in Star Is Born. Like, so she
is a great example of how she was told at school. Yeah. She's delusional, and she was bullied for saying to people at school, I'm going to be a musician. Yeah. And she was bullied for it and told, no, you're not, by everyone in her school. Yeah, and we believe her now, right? So, exactly.
So,
would she be where she is now if she hadn't have been like that?
Probably not. Like, there's definitely, it's all about mindset as well. Like, every like, I don't know, like every 2 days, I can hear that now.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's knocking going on somewhere around here.
Yeah. Every two or 3 days or so, right, might be a limiting self-belief that pops in your head, right? And I'm talking about anyone who's listening to this podcast or yourself or myself, right? And it's all about recovery from that. So there used to be a point maybe 5-6 years ago where I would have a limiting self-belief and I wouldn't recover from that quickly. And what I found was, like, the quicker you recover from the limiting self-belief, right, the better it is for you. So, for example, if you're like, oh, this podcast thing, I'm not sure about this, the Martin Talk Show versus BTS, blah, 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 right? And
I've wrestled with that this past month. I really have.
So if you've got if you're thinking, how long did you think about that for? When you were like, oh, should I rebrand it? Should I?
In the beginning, quite a lot, and I think that held me back. When that idea started to come to me that I need to change this up, and I started going down, because it's the fear of the perception of others is the big problem there. Is knowing that I need to is where I want to be in 5 years from now, and it's moving towards that. So if I keep things as they are, I'm not going to move towards that 5 year plan. Yeah. So I need to make a pivot. I need to make an adjustment. But if I make it an adjustment, and it definitely sounds ego driven, doesn't it? the Martin Talk Show. It definitely sounds like this is now all about me. And I know that people that know me are definitely going to say, oh, there you go, Martin's ego is getting even bigger now. I know that's going to happen, and that's scary. Yeah, that is actually very, very scary. You know that opinion's going to be out there, but I guess I have to push myself past that.
Yeah, but how long did that process take you from initial concept idea to I'm going to do this?
Well, November.
Okay.
And this is episode 1 of that.
Okay, in January.
So we're talking a good 6 weeks. Right. But in that 6 weeks, I've moved forward with that idea. There's the website is now there. The rebranding of everything has changed. All the social media handles have changed. So they changed about 2 weeks ago. So it took 4 weeks for one day for me to go, fuck it. Like, press the button. This is happening today. This isn't 4 weeks is kind of enough for me to consider and be concerned of the impact and the change. Because, there's also the changing that and pivoting. Things that were going well for me before might not go so well for me now.
I mean, just imagine if there's 4 weeks, right? Or 4 days.
Yeah, or even 4 hours. Or 4 minutes. How further along I would already be.
Yeah, so obviously you've got to take some time to make decisions. I'm not saying just to make any decision, but at the same time, so that was...
What did I really accomplish by holding on for 4 weeks?
But also there's someone who's held on for 4 years, listening to this podcast right now, saying that I've held on for 4 years, I've not done it. I need to do it, right? So it's all about making that limiting self-belief or making that doubt, right, as short as possible and the recovery as good as possible. So, for example, for myself, like, whatever limiting belief I had 5-6 years ago, it would take me 3 days to recover, right? And I got it to a point where it took me 3 minutes to recover, right? And therefore, I saved hours and hours and hours of days. Now it comes to a point that if I have a limiting self-belief I tell that person that he's delusional and move forward anyway. So it's like, do you know what it is? It's overthinking. So I think the more time you have to think, right, the
worse it kind of gets, because you start coming up with different variations,
which never happened.
Yeah. So far, no one said to me about my ego, and we're 2 weeks in.
Well, I had one thing to say.
But yeah, that, you know, and even if they do come to me with the things that I was worried about, I guess that 4 weeks may have helped me kind of prepare for that.
Yeah, that's true.
And so there is some preparation in there, in that 4 weeks. But for me personally, I'm at a place now where 4 weeks is enough to consider a change in direction, a new move.
Yeah, if someone, for example, now makes a comment on a Martin Talk show in a pub or whatever in your personal life, it will all be about the recovery time. So maybe it's someone who's close to you that you care about, you've had like kind of emotional connection with, like an uncle or whatever, right? You're like, Martin, what are you doing, right? You're gonna think about that for like, you know, a few hours, like, this is the uncle I really love, like he played football with me, and now he's...
It's like you know what's going on in my life right now. Like you're touching on something that's like...
Do you know what? You know why? Because it's common everywhere.
Things. This is everywhere. Common lived experience.
But if it's like uncle banter, 5 minutes, I don't care. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, no. Someone that I look up to a lot. Someone that's older than me. Just after New Year's, we're sitting down at the pub with a group of people, and everyone was talking about their jobs and going back to work after Christmas and New Year's. Now, my job isn't a normal structured job, so it's hard for others to understand what I'm doing. So they go around like, oh, who's retired and who doesn't have to do work anymore, and who's returning to work next Monday and all this. And I don't really have a join in that conversation because I'm constantly working.
Yeah, it's true.
Like I don't really have a Christmas off. I can choose to pause and rest, but that's my choice. But I'm working most of the time. And then then this person that was doing this was like, oh, and of course you, Martin, you're the lazy one. And I was like, yeah, all right. And I didn't have anything more to say to that, but it was like a punch in the gut. Yeah. Because I'm not the lazy one. Yeah. I work really, really hard.
Yeah. For a job like this or whatever we do, right? We're actually, anyone who's a CEO of their own thing, right? Even if it's a small company, they're actually working all the time. Like even on a Sunday night, they're thinking about something, right? So as you were saying, that you are the opposite of the lazy one. In fact, they're probably the lazy ones.
Well, I wouldn't like to put that on them, but it's the perception of others. But then, yeah, like you say, the recovery from that, I think that lasted half a day of a gut punch. That you know, I was there for a moment, but then I don't dwell on it. Like that was a few weeks ago, and we're here now, and you've kind of reminded me through this conversation how I'm feeling again.
That was an amazing guess, right?
Like you say, shared experiences. When none of these things that we go through, we're going through alone. Yeah, we don't. We all have similar moments, and if we can find those people that can help guide us out of that, and I think you are today helping guide me out of that, helping me put that to one side. Yeah, that we can be analytical of that, and we can be considerate of that's just one person's opinion. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's the truth as well.
No.
And you'll be surprised how many times like it's someone who's older than you. So someone who's for some reason when we're younger we always think that someone who's older than us we should listen to them or they have more experience. So someone who's like 55, right, may not be as mature emotionally or whatever as you are, right? So even if they say something, right, you automatically assume, all right, they're 15 years older, therefore they must have some credence to what they say, right? But you shouldn't assume that. And opinion is opinion, like you said, it's not truth. And actually one of my friends actually helped kind of drill that into me about 5 years ago when someone gave me their opinion about something. And for some reason, I just thought it was the truth because that person said it to me, and maybe one other person said it to me, but actually wasn't true at all. It was just that two people had similar opinions. And that's something that people should be careful about as well. Like you said with echo chambers, right? There could be 2 or 3 people who have the same opinions, and all of a sudden it's like the wisdom of crowds. Surely if they say it must be true. But you got to remember that it could be an echo chamber, and it could be that those 2 or 3 people just think the same immature way, and they haven't worked on themselves, and therefore that opinion is not actually the truth. And so it's really all about recovery times. It's all about not overthinking. And the analogy I use is basically the reason I go to the gym, right, is obviously for physical reasons and mental reasons, right? It's really helped overall in terms of my drive, right? And basically, I used to overthink a lot. I don't anymore. And the reason is, I use a gym as an example. When you're lifting a very heavy weight, like on a bench press or a squat, right, there is no time to overthink. The only thing you're thinking about is, I need to lift this, otherwise it will crush me, right? And that's the kind of way you need to go about life as well. That's why I love the gym, because it's actually stopped any overthinking I had back in the day. And I think people who overthink, I always kind of tell them, I ask them, do you exercise? Are you working 9 to 5, etc.? Just because any person who doesn't really has more time to fill, your time will be filled by your brain. Your brain is always looking for ways to survive or whatever. Your brain will fill emptiness with something. So you going to the gym, like I said, like if you're lifting heavy weight, you literally have no time to think. It's helping you mentally, it's helping you physically, right? And really, without, even if I don't go to the gym for 2 weeks, like over Christmas, for example, right, and I'm eating so many mince pies and whatever, right, all of a sudden, like, you do start overthinking again. I mean, it's not as, I can stop myself because I kind of can control it, but I can see how people, even not going to the gym for 2 weeks, can get into bad habits. And
you're sorting so much stuff out for me today.
It's a therapy session.
This is a therapy session for me, because I haven't been to the gym since August, since we met last.
Yeah.
So since I was going to the gym quite regularly at that up until that point, but then this has got busy.
Yeah.
So this is taking up a lot of my time, a lot of late nights. And so my routine where I was going to the gym early mornings, the late nights were becoming difficult. And then Christmas comes along and, and all these different things happen in life. Like you say, your brain finds a way to fill the time that I'm out of that routine now. And I'm noticing, I'm at that point now where I'm starting to notice, but the weight loss one, sorry, not weight loss, the weight gain.
Okay.
Since August, I put on a stone since August.
Okay.
But also the benefit that's taken away from my life. I've lost something there that I need to refine that. And I think today you're telling me I need to refine that.
That's not what I was saying. But I just think it's a good analogy to use, because like it's helped me basically, right? So
physical fitness does inform mental fitness.
It does, and it should really have the same weights as kind of physical fitness when it comes to mentally. A lot of, if you look at, I've met a lot of people on the dating scene, etc., and really. Colleagues, friends of friends, and I can basically now, instead of it's not like, not in a mean way, right? But I can kind of profile the person if I talk to them enough about what they would, because I've done this for myself, right? Like what they would need to kind of improve in terms of their in terms of their kind of interactions, social interactions. I have people I know who are like in their 40s who act like 20-year-olds, right? And I know people in their 20s that are super mature, and I can see that they've had that introspection, and it's really one of those where I'm not sure without going through something that you'll be able to do it, because I think people tend to want to go away from any kind of introspection and self-reflection, and really it's that time you can have alone. I think the pandemic was a big one. Like a lot of people came out of the pandemic really badly, but whereas I was different, right? Because I'd already gone through that kind of stuff like 15 years ago, whatever, right? So I already knew my triggers. I already knew how to work it out, the recovery time stuff. I already knew that stuff, right? So when the pandemic happened, I was actually like, I was fine. Like I had to work from home and etc. And it wasn't as bad for me, but I saw what people were going through, and obviously I was trying to help them out when I could. But it was just interesting to see how everyone is not everyone is the perfect. Like you always assume you're the one with flaws and everyone else is perfect, right? But everyone else is the same. Everyone's got their own flaws. Some people have to work on different things. And so you can't really blame them for it. It's a human experience, right? So that also helps you not be too hard on yourself, because you always think, oh, those people at the pub have a perfect life, going back to work on Monday. Well, I'm not sure. This person has said this thing. Like, what should I? Am I being delusional? Like, what? You've just got to like kind of find a way to forgive yourself, forgive them as well, because they don't always know what they're talking about, and just go ahead with your recovery time and kind of like going on with life. And I think that's the only way to live life, because you don't want to be 80 years old looking back and be like, oh, I should have listened to those guys. I stopped doing my podcast or whatever. I want to see episode 3000 basically.
You will, don't worry. But so we talked a little bit about who's informed your filmmaking.
Yeah.
But who is there that you consider that you've stood on the shoulder of giants, but in a personal way, in life? Who is it that has informed these philosophies that you have?
Well, obviously, like the first people to inform any philosophies are your parents, right? Mm-hmm. So my parents are quite good in terms of the fact that they're not super strict and they're quite liberal. Mm-hmm. And so that's really helped me kind of in terms of keeping me grounded and stuff. My mum's super nice. She's like very positive. Like she's very happy-go-lucky. Mm-hmm. And so am I. So basically, she's one that's kind of showed me that, you know, if something bad happened, just forget about it. Like it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. Like she would someone would annoy her or whatever, she'd forget about it literally the next day. Whereas you know, other people would like dwell upon it and be like, oh my god, whatever. And also obviously your family is a big thing. One person I would like to credit like for helping me with this kind of recovery thing and stopping overthinking was an old manager I had. Am I allowed to say her name? Or?
As long as we're not saying anything negative, I don't see any reason why.
So her name was Gabrielle. She was a manager of mine. And there was a period when we were doing data analysis, right, that, you know, I was a bit down on myself and whatever. And I would get up, go to work, right, and I wouldn't be very like, you know, very like lethargic, and people could see that I was, you know, not happy or whatever. They would make comments and stuff. It wasn't like a big thing. It was just how I was feeling at the time, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember what Gabrielle did. She didn't give me any advice or anything, right? But what she did was she was so relentless in her management in terms of like she always had another piece of work for me that I remember I would get up at like 8:30, right? Log in at 9, right? And Gabrielle would be on a meeting at 9:30, right? Mm-hmm. And so she basically was so relentless with the work she gave me, right, that I had no time to be sad. So basically, I saw a quote as well saying that adulthood is when you wake up sad and you have no time to be sad. And it was like 100% true there. Mm-hmm. So what Gabrielle did for me was like, she used to give me so much work that I had no time to overthink. And I was like, oh my God, I've got this piece of work. I've got this piece of work. And then all of a sudden I started forgetting what I did on the weekend. Because Gabrielle was like forward thinking. She was like Monday 9:30. Okay, we have to do this, and that. How was your weekend? I can't remember what I did.
So it sounds to me like there was a point in your life where you was living in the past.
Yeah, for sure.
This Gabrielle, she moved you to live in the future, but then you found yourself in the present.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I would kind of. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, Gabrielle didn't do anything that was like, she didn't give me advice. I mean, sometimes she did give me advice, but not specifically on that kind of thing. But because she was so relentless with the work she gave me, right, and everyone else, like she was, you know what, she was so intelligent. She could think of a million things at the same time. If I didn't understand something in terms of business wise, she would explain it in like such a quick way. Because I can keep up with people talking really fast. I could kind of keep up with it. I was like, oh my God, she thinks even faster than me. And if there's a bit of data analysis that like I couldn't really kind of work out and there would be a delay, she would be like, and so she was really useful in kind of making me kind of move forward. And so like with that help, I've kind of like stopped looking back. And then obviously, like you've said, with like everything since then, I've kind of like come to like the present moment. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes you need to let yourself, and I could have said to Gabrielle, you're being too much. Can you please slow down? Like, blah, blah. But I could tell right away that, you know, this was actually kind of helping me.
That's what you needed at that moment in time.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes you just could be like open to receiving stuff. And sometimes like people a few years ago would like insult me in the pub to my face, right? Mm-hmm. And there would be times that obviously you want to come back with a bit of banter as well. But there were just times where I would just take it, right? And the reason I would take it is because I would see like how far is this person going to go? Like they're telling me more about themselves than anything, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes you've got to let other people kind of project on you, because that teaches you more about them, right? And also you let if someone wants to help you in a certain way, I would say just take the advice. You don't have to follow it, or at least try it, because that person, I mean, Gabrielle might have seen this in me and she'd be like, okay, this guy needs to, he's reminiscing too much. He needs to kind of like do some work. The excitement of work will make him fall. Maybe she did that. I don't know. But, some people have different ways of doing stuff, and it's not always intentional. But yeah.
Well, this is, I feel like that's a wonderful place to wrap this up. I do have one final question for you. Sure. We're kind of travelling through time a little bit here with this conversation.
Like a Christopher Nolan movie.
We are, aren't we? This is like a Christopher Nolan movie, but a podcast. But so I know that when we did the podcast last time, we went to the future. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
We talked about 10 years in the future. You'd like to be directing a James Bond movie, and you can see that, you keep going along the path that you're going along, and that could be.
I'll have you as consultant so that we can kind of like do it together.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm up for that. Shake on that. Yeah,
GoldenEye 2035.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, deal mates on camera. Part of the James. I could still play James Bond 50s, couldn't I?
Yeah, I mean, we have to change the storyline a bit.
We would, but no. But yeah, so we went to the future on the previous podcast, but I'd like to take this back to wrap this up to your younger self. When you're at that moment of discovering the joy of filmmaking, what advice would you say to yourself? What would you say to drive yourself forward at that moment?
I would just say keep going. So there was a period in my 20s where I didn't do much, and so I've always felt a bit behind. Which is not the way to think about it, really, because everyone's on their own timeline. But I would say really similar to what I've said today in terms of recovery time. Like, don't worry about your self-doubt, because everyone has self-doubt. Even my co-producer Chirag had self-doubt about his photography career. I guarantee most people watching or listening to this podcast will have some kind of self-doubt. And what I would advise myself as well, is that it's all about recovery time. So whenever you get hit, the gut punch that you had, for example, any gut punch that I had in my teen years or 20s, right? Be grateful for the experience, because it will kind of push you forward. And just know that recovery time is the most kind of efficient way to move forward. Like, you don't want to waste 3 or 4 years, or even 10 years, or some people waste decades, right? Just thinking, I don't want to do this because this person would think that of me, and I'm really influential in my community. I don't want my auntie's best friend's sister think like, who cares? Just do it.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks again, AJ. I really do appreciate you for joining the podcast once more. Be nice to catch up with you again in the future, and let's make that James Bond movie.
Yeah,
and if anyone has been watching or listening, we appreciate you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
again. Cheers.
Cool.